know that he taught me in 1985 when I was a student. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my other experience with him. I also want to recognize Dr. Roel Ellis, who is now the program coordinator for the project management program, and who works very closely with us in the Office of Dean. So, you know, special welcome to you and for taking this initiative. Mr. Derek Outridge, who I know as Chief Cook and Bottle Washer. He is QS, he's planner, he's lawyer, he is everything else that I can possibly think of, and a former lecturer in civil engineering as well. So recognition to you. Ms. Chevenise Parks, one of our graduates who is going to bring some vote of thanks as well. Colleagues, students, alumni, specially invited guests, relatives of honorees, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome all of you to this celebration. You know, for me, it's really important to recognize the contributions that our colleagues make, the effort that they make in ensuring that we educate our stakeholders, that we share our wisdom, we share our experiences. It is only through these kinds of things that we do that we uplift our stakeholders, we uplift our society. I see one of our former colleagues, Dr. Ian Kant-Kernahan, who again taught me one lecture many, many years ago. Yeah, I think it was 85 as well. You may not remember it. But again, you know, people like that who would have contributed very significantly. I am very pleased to recognize Professor Suite and honor his open lecture that he's going to do on my personal journey in project management. And I really look forward to his sharing of his experience and his wisdom that he would have gained over a very, very long journey. As I said, he taught me in 1985. But what is also interesting is that, you know, on the interview panel, when I applied to become dean, Professor Suite was one of the panelists. So it is because of Professor Suite's contribution I could stand before you and bring greetings. So thank you, Prof. Suite, for all those years. But I also want to add that we've shared a few table tennis games at our senior common room as well. I don't know if you recall those, but we did share a few of those as well. And so we've had many, many interactions since I joined the faculty in 1988. I also want to recognize, I see Professor Imbert, Clem Imbert, or Clement Imbert, more precisely. Welcome, sir, to this very special event that we are hosting in honor of Professor Suite and other former colleagues. I do also want to say that, you know, when we recognize not only our teachers, but the other people who would have served us well, and I mean, you know, Mrs. Sylvester, Lawrence Sylvester, and Ms. Lizama, sorry, we are saying that, you know, and this is something that I believe in, is that, you know, academics carry a lot of work for us, and they are in the classroom, but the legs that would allow us to run the other people, the administrative staff, the technical staff. And it is important to recognize that. It's important to celebrate that these are the people who work in the background and who may not get the kudos normally because we celebrate the frontline people, but these are people that also support the work that we do. So I welcome you again to this very special event and to thank you for the opportunity to bring greetings and to commit that the Faculty of Engineering, as Dean, I would like to commit to making sure that this becomes a faculty type of event where we celebrate all of our colleagues, and especially when they're here to witness the celebration, not when they would have passed on. And I think this is important to do, to say to people in their faces, thank you for your service, and to know that it is well-deserving. So I hope we have a very successful event this evening. I look forward to your lecture, Professor Suite, and to thank all of you for coming and to celebrating with us. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Professor Ramlal, for your kind words and continued leadership. We now welcome someone who continues to shape the program built on Professor Suite's foundation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ruel Ellis, Program Coordinator for the Master of Science in Project Management.
Good evening, all. All protocols haven't been observed, and Professor Ramlal having exhausted all the thanks and welcomes to everyone, I shall skip that part. And I'm going to focus primarily on the program, where it came from, where it is, and where we are going. So, welcome everyone to this special celebration. It is my distinct honor to open tonight's program as we gather for a dual celebration, recognizing the accreditation of the MSc Project Management Program by the Association of Project Management out of the United Kingdom, and more importantly, honoring the visionary who made it all possible, Professor Emeritus Winston Suite. The APM accreditation distinguishes the MSc Project Management from all other available project management training options in the country. It provides our graduates with the opportunity to become chartered project management practitioners, unlike the other PM qualifications, which necessitates a further 7 years of studies and mentorship. Our MSc Project Management shortens the route to chartership to 3 years and cements the MSc Project Management's position as the flagship MSc program here at St. Augustine, and is the only APM recognized program in the Caribbean and Latin American region. It was Professor Suite's vision to have the program accredited by a body which recognized academic rigor, depth, and latitude. When this program began, I believe was it 2004, 2006, 2003? Okay, thank you, corrected. All right. It was among the first 5 MSc programs in the world, a testimony of the vision of Professor Suite. Achieving this accreditation is actually the fruits of the seed which he planted and asked Mr. Lau, Stanley Lau, and myself to take care of. Mr. Lau, God bless his soul, has passed, but Professor Suite is here, a fortunate man to be able to sit in the shadow of a tree which he had planted. When the program was launched at St. Augustine, it was also offered in Guyana. As the enrollment in Guyana dropped off, the decision was taken to facilitate the Guyanese students online. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the local students were asked to join their Guyanese counterparts online, making this program the only one at the university operating with nonstop at a time, without having a break, while the rest of the university transitioned. That was only possible due to the entrepreneurial spirit with which Professor Suite infused the program at its inception. That entrepreneurial spirit continues as the majority of staff which teaches in the program are regional and international project management consultants. Actually, many of our graduates are consultants in their own right internationally, which bring to the classroom cultural awareness, development issues, and policy paradigms, all of which help to provide our graduates with project management acumen that distinguishes them from project management technicians. As we look to the future, we carry forward Professor Suite's commitment to excellence, innovation, and service. This accreditation is not the end point, but a new beginning, opening doors to possibilities such as the Project Management Center, which Professor Suite and I spoke about many years ago, that he envisioned, and we are now in a position to achieve. Tonight's celebration is just beginning. We'll hear more about Professor Suite's remarkable journey and prayerfully the program's evolution from the man himself when he is invited to address us. So let's join in expressing our deep gratitude to someone who saw the possibilities when others saw challenges and whose vision is now achieved international recognition. So thank you, Professor Suite.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ellis, for that thoughtful reflection on where we've come and where we're headed. Our next speaker is a distinguished professional whose career spans over 4 decades across engineering, law, and education. Yet this evening, he joins us not only as an expert, but as a grateful mentee. Mr. Derek Irvin Outridge is a chartered quantity surveyor, attorney at law, arbitrator, and senior lecturer at the University of the West Indies. He has served in leadership roles across national institutions, including the Central Tenders Board, the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, and the Institute of Surveyors. He is also a published author, global contributor to land governance policy, and a fellow of the Quantity Surveyors Institute. But more personally, his journey in academia was deeply shaped by our guest of honor. Professor Suite was his Master of Philosophy supervisor, his lecturer, and the person who introduced him to teaching in Trinidad and Guyana. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Derek Outridge as he shares his reflections on the legacy of Professor Emeritus Winston Suite. Please welcome Mr. Outridge.
Thank you very much, Samantha. I almost didn't recognize myself. Well, all protocols have already been observed, and I want to say my special thanks to my mentor, Professor Emeritus Winston Suite. I also want to recognize Ms. Lynette Sibaran-Suite, my president in the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago. And I also want to recognize Professor Clem Imber. Right. He is a member of my alma mater, Holy Cross College. Special place in my heart for persons who've gone before us. So, today, Professor Emeritus Winston Herbert Edward Suite, our esteemed guest of honor, we are profoundly grateful for your presence here today as we collectively recognize the invaluable contributions of Professor Emeritus Suite, a figure of great influence and respect in our field. As we embark on this ceremony, I would like to invite the students, fellow educators, friends, and colleagues to engage with us during this recognition. The remarks of recognition is in the following format: an introduction, an expression of gratitude, past encounters, the remarkable journey, and conclusions and summary. So introducing. In preparing for this recognition, I sought insights from those who have had the privilege of working alongside Professor Suite, when I announced my intention to deliver these remarks of recognition, the enthusiastic response was unanimous. Now, boy, is Suite you're talking about? You know, what can I say? Sweet is sweet. Now, boy, sweet is sweet. I've translated that. It says, what can I say? Sweet is indeed exceptional. So every time you hear me say, now boy, sweet is sweet, it means, what can I say? Sweet is indeed exceptional. The sentiment resonates deeply and brings to mind the poignant quote from Professor Suite's tribute to George Weeks. Why do we in TNT, in particular, seem always to wait until long after someone has passed on in death, often when most of the living has little or no knowledge of the person in question, to seek to bestow honors? As was mentioned by Professor Ramlal, we seem reluctant to praise. We sometimes rise only when recognition has come from outside, from a foreign voice. The dead cannot hear us. Is it that we wish to hear ourselves, or are we seeking selfishly or vicariously to steal some of the just praise for ourselves? We honor ourselves as if it is in the act of praising others. Now, boy, sweet is sweet. You recognize that, Professor? Exactly. So it translates that why do we in Trinidad and Tobago, in particular, tend to wait until persons have died, have gone, without knowing their contribution, and it's diminished. You know. So indeed, Professor Suite embodies excellence and our expression of gratitude. Today we gather to express our gratitude for and recognition of an individual who has dedicated his life to advocating for his principles and furthering the management of construction projects. We are here to bestow our acknowledgement, our thanks, and the privilege of knowing a man who has for most of his life fought for what is his belief and has dedicated his academic career to build and promote the management of construction projects by putting the project as the number one priority over any professional qualifications as engineer, architect, surveyor, planner, etc. It is my distinct honor to illuminate the numerous roles and accomplishments of this esteemed professor. So we've known him as a construction leader, project manager, construction manager, civil engineer, procurement leader, consultant, lecturer, teacher, and educator, graduate with a Master of Science, PhD doctoral degree, Fulbright postdoctoral scholarship program at American universities, Academy Exchange Fellow, Commonwealth Fund for Technology Cooperatives, arbitrator, site manager. I know only that too well. Director of numerous organizations, chairman of several entities, friend, mentor, supervisor, and advocate of humanitarian principles. Chairman of many organizations and entities, a fellow to all, a fierce defender of his inherent principles and beliefs to build and promote mankind. Now, boy, sweet is sweet. It is important to note that Professor Suite's reputation is widely acknowledged further emphasizing he is indeed remarkable. My past encounters. I recall my first encounter with the then Mr. Winston Suite in the summer of 1977, when I was serving as a checker at Suite Engineering Services. Suite was the site engineer overseeing the Bregan Park project in Dabadi. He left a lasting impression on me with his commitment to effective resource management. So I left the field of agriculture and joined the field of construction. Thank you, Professor Suite. You wouldn't recall that day. My second significant interaction occurred in the early of 1998, when the then Dr. Winston Suite founded the UE Construction Industry Roundtable. This initiative gathered leaders from various sectors within the Trinidad and Tobago construction industry, addressing challenges. At that time, it was a stagnation of the industry and issues of transparency. Professor Suite aimed to stimulate change through this forum, facilitating the identification of critical issues and policy recommendations to fortify the local construction sector. I was truly grateful to be appointed to this table to contribute to the growth of our industry. My third significant encounter. There were many others. These are the significant ones. With Professor Suite was in the late part of 1998 when I enrolled as a part-time MPhil student in surveying and land information, urban and regional planning focus at the University of the West Indies, Faculty of Engineering, Department of Surveying and Land Information, now known as the Department of Geomatics Engineering. I was assigned 2 supervisors, one of which was Professor Suite. He was at the time coordinator of the Construction Engineering and Management Program in the Department of Civil Engineering, Faculty of Engineering, University of the West Indies. His approach to mentorship was unique. He often addressed me as chief. A term of endearment he extended to all his associates. During my years of interaction with him, I cannot ever recall him calling me by name. Whenever he wanted to speak to me, he would start by saying, "Chief." In fact, I soon learned that he called everyone chief. I soon came to return the favor of recognizing him as such and also addressed him as chief, my chief. Allow me to briefly summarize the remarkable journey of Professor Emeritus Winston Hubert Edward Suite. He was born on June 17, 1940 in Princestown. Belated birthday greetings to you, sir. His father, Alan Suite, mother, Mabel Suite, nee Cooper. His spouse, Lynette Maria Siberan Suite, and his children, Vladimir and Dara. I want to address Professor Suite's contributions under 3 headings: educational, institutional, and leadership. So he went to Presentation College, achieved a BSc in physics at UE Mona 1965, a BSc in civil engineering, UE St. Augustine 1974, a PhD in civil engineering, UE St. Augustine 1978, a master's in construction engineering and management, UE St. Augustine in 1982. At the institutional level, he was a teacher at QRC in 1965 to 1967, and ModSec. We know that as San Fernando Secondary. From 1967 to 1970, a lecturer at the University of the West Indies 1983 to 1986, and senior lecturer from 1986 to 2009, Vice Provost of the University of Trinidad and Tobago and the University of the West, and Professor of Project Management at UTT and University of the West Indies, 2009 to 2014. Other institutional milestones include founding the UE Construction Roundtable in 1998, establishing the Master's in Degree in Project Management program at UE in 2003. And he suckered me into lecturing into that program in 2003. Thank you, Professor Suite. Suite hoped to create change through this construction roundtable to determine the critical factors that operated in the sector, the principal characteristics, the developments, the strategies to guide its development, and to recommend policy directives to the sector. Under his contribution as leadership, he was elected the president of the Association of Professional Engineers of Trinidad and Tobago from 1985 to 1986. He was the Academy Exchange Fellow of the Commonwealth Fund for Technology Corporation in England. And he was appointed the Director of National Quarries Limited, 1987 to 1992. A Fulbright postdoctoral fellow, Latin America Scholarship Program of America Universities. Chairman of the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, 1989 to 1992. Chairman of the Public Transport Service Corporation, 1999 to 2001. Chairman of the National Infrastructure Development Company from 2014 to 2015. He was appointed Chairman of the National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago, and in 2018 to 2025, he was the board member of the Public Procurement Review Board. You still there, or are you continuing? We have a change in government, you know. Professor Suite's impact is recognized both by students who often describe him as a wealth of knowledge and a passionate mentor. So I want to tell you some of his students' comments, what he said to me about him. He's a walking library. He's an off-the-cuff lecturer. He was very adamant, such that when he speaks to you, you must take notes. As he says, the human brain cannot process all that he is saying. He's passionate about law of the contract. He had a love for engineering. He would push you to think beyond the envelope. A stickler for ethics and morality. He's keen on the management of projects. He can converse with anyone on any aspect of engineering and construction. A person who wore many hats and wore them well. He's highly respected and accomplished. He can expound on any facet of development and infrastructure, and I would extend it to anything. He thought beyond the box, and he excelled at guiding young minds and got you interested to engineer, build, and manage with a passion. Nah, boy, Suite is Suite. And by his colleagues, who commend his intelligence and unique approach to problem solving. And I want to share with you some of the comments of his colleagues. Highly intelligent and eccentric, not the normal thinker, confrontational and argumentative. He had a passion to get things done. He existed on the management side of construction and engineering. He never respected the white lines. When pursuing an idea, he was fearsome in its delivery and would not let anyone derail it. He fought many battles with colleagues on the grading of students. He was very opinionated, hard to change his mind or belief in something. A non-conformer does not give ground. It's his way or the highway. He was dominating. Somewhat of an anarchist. He's forthright and uncompromising. A complex person, very bright and knew what he wanted in life. He had a passionate following and was somewhat of a guru to students. He was somewhat of a one-man show, and he felt no one was his equal and tried to do everything by himself. He's an outlier. Nah, boy, sweet is sweet. So welcome to the forum, Chief. Now, Professor. We are here today for your journey into project management that you will share with us. So while I am at this juncture, let me thank you for introducing and conditioning me into being more than a chartered quantity surveyor, but also a practicing construction project manager. And it was not only I who Professor Suite indoctrinated in this field, but some 1,000 plus project and construction managers, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but throughout the construction industry in the Caribbean region, positioning them not just as practitioners, but as passionate advocates in the field. Many persons do not have the pleasure of enjoying the company of such an iconic man. So in conclusion and summary, I want to recall that after the 2010 Commission of Inquiry into the construction industry, when discussing with Professor Suite its outcome, the 91 recommendations of the Commission, he said to me, Chief, that was not an inquiry into the construction industry. That was project management on trial. You recall those words? Nah, boy, sweet is sweet. In summary, after a comprehensive examination of his career and contributions, it is evident that Professor Emeritus Winston Hubert Edward Suite is an exceptional leader in project management and construction engineering. And as John C. Maxwell eloquently stated, a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. And based on the collective recognition here today, we can further assert that a leader such as Professor Emeritus Winston Suite teaches the way and does so in his unique manner. Professor Emeritus Hubert Edward Suite, we honor you and your outstanding contributions to project management and society at large. Nah, boy, sweet is sweet. Thank you, Chief, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Outridge. Nah, boy, that was a good one. For your eloquent tribute and powerful reminder of what mentorship truly means. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor to introduce the man whose journey, contributions, and vision we are here to celebrate this evening. Professor Emeritus Winston Hubert Edward Suite, yes, they gave me all your names, is a pioneering figure in Trinidad and Tobago's academic and national development landscape. His story began in the rural town of Princestown, and from those modest beginnings, he rose to shape the very foundations of how we understand, teach, and lead in the field of project management. An alumnus of Presentation College San Fernando, Professor Suite's academic and professional trajectory reflects a rare balance of intellect, integrity, and nation-building spirit. His career began as a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, in the late 1970s. He later earned his Master of Science in Construction Engineering and Management, and went on to lead the Master of Science Project Management program, becoming its founding architect a legacy that continues to influence leaders across the Caribbean. Now, over the course of more than 5 decades, Professor Suite has served as chairman of several key national institutions, including the Airports Authority, PTSC, NITCO, and the National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago, where he worked to preserve and protect our tangible heritage. His influence extended to UTT, where he served as Professor of Project Management and Civil Infrastructure Systems, and later as Vice Provost and Senior Research Fellow. But beyond his many titles and achievements, Professor Suite is a teacher, a mentor, and a quiet force of transformation. His impact is seen not only in infrastructure and institutions, but in the countless minds he has shaped, the students he has uplifted, and the principles of service and excellence he has consistently upheld. Tonight, under the theme, My Personal Journey in Project Management, we are privileged to hear from a man whose journey is as inspiring as it is instructive. Please join me in warmly welcoming our guest of honor and keynote speaker, Professor Emeritus Winston Suite. Excuse me, Mr. Suite. I had a quick announcement for vehicle numbers PBX 6500 and TCL 2945. If you could please attend to your vehicles. Professor Suite.
First, let me apologize. I will try to stay here and deliver my presentation because I did write it out. If, as time passes, I am forced to sit, I'll crave your indulgence. The document is entitled My Journey from Graduate Civil Engineer to Project Manager. Apologia. Because I wanted to apologize for whatever errors that might flow from what I have to say or conjure up. Introduction. The moment I was invited to present the inaugural distinguished lecture to the project management program of the Faculty of Engineering, the University of the West Indies, I was overwhelmed with a great responsibility and honor bestowed on me by the leaders of the program and by the faculty of my alma mater, UWI. At this moment, in the twilight of my career as civil engineer, project manager, academic, researcher, and above all, teacher in engineering. I, however, immediately knew what would be the subject of my presentation. There was no hesitation, no doubt. I would share with the distinguished audience my autobiographical journey from graduate, civil engineer, project manager, academic, lecturer, arbitrator, consultant to both the private sector and the state and public sector. I would bequeath to young engineers in particular and all those in general who are interested in a career of project management, my legacy and experience. I hope, however, that in the process, I do not bore you with the details of my presentation. In this regard, I crave both your indulgence as well as your respect and forgiveness. Confession. I have to begin the exercise with a confession. I must begin the tale with a confession. I did not graduate from high school with a burning fire to be a civil engineer. In fact, I was not interested to the slightest in pursuing a career in any branch of engineering whatsoever. Engineering was the furthest from my thoughts. I later opted to study physics as a fallback because I did not have the finances to do what I really wanted to do. I will tell you all what that is after. When I obtained a government scholarship to do sciences, I was off to Jamaica and opted for physics, my second choice. The obvious course would be to pursue a career in teaching. This took me to Jamaica and a degree in special physics. 2 years teaching physics in Port of Spain at Queen's Royal College, and then 2.5 years at Modern Secondary, San Fernando, also known as MUDSEC. The details of an abrupt end of my teaching career and high school physics was public knowledge. This was to lead to my suspension from a teaching career that was to last for the next 6.5 years, 21st of April, 1970 to June 1976. During this period, I was first detained for 6.5 months from the 21st, as I said, of April 1970 to October of 1970 at Her Majesty's and the government's pleasure at Frederick Street, Port of Spain in the Royal Jail. The de facto end of a teaching career. It was during my period of incarceration that I realized that this was going to be the end of my career of teaching physics in Trinidad and Tobago. I would have to seek a new career path. During the last month of detention, it struck me that I should entertain a new career in engineering. I was never interested in engineering, as I said, nor any branch. The choice whatsoever, therefore, was both difficult and at the same time easy for me because I had no interest. But I realized that that's what I was awaiting me. A career in engineering, not by choice. Engineering, but which branch of engineering, I asked myself. I would have to begin at the beginning, a first degree in engineering, oh Lord, 3 more years at an undergraduate degree, BSc. But what branch? Electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, civil engineering. They were all the same to me. I had no interest. The question of future employment was to reduce the choice to civil engineering. And civil engineering alone. My elder brother Nello had pursued civil engineering in Edinburgh, Scotland, and in the end, this fact was to weigh heavily in the influence on the choice. If it was to be engineering, then it would have to be civil engineering, not out of love, nor out of the prospect of wealth. It was the only employment opportunity available to me. However, I did not make a decision, since I did not have to make a decision in the first year. Not at this point, in any case. I could put that off for the time being until much later on when I had completed year one. So I went into first year, and I didn't know what I was going to do, because you didn't have to make a choice before you came in or during first year. When the state of emergency ended, it was about the end of October 1971. I was almost a month in year two lectures, and beginning of the academic year 1971-72. I would be around more or less 10 years older than the average student in my class, a fact that continued to haunt me throughout my student and professional years. I was in a class with students whom I had taught physics in high school in Queen's Royal College or in Mod Sec a decade or more ago. A bit of an exaggeration. I had much to catch up upon. I must admit, I applied myself with much focus and energy in the year one engineering course and intended to do well, and I continued in the same manner in year two. It was in this year two when I was 2 weeks having but chosen to pursue civil engineering program, when I was detained again at the pleasure of the government for the second state of emergency. I was very disappointed. I would lose the entire year too. 2 classmates, Carlisle Boyce and David Sobers, Bajans, both from Barbados, decided that they would send their notes for me while I was in prison. I noted here, so the notes were brought for me on visiting days by my girlfriend, Thelma, who would later become the mother of my son. I had written to the then dean of the faculty, Professor K.J. Julian, letting him know that I was receiving the notes and was studying the work while detained, and was asking for his permission to take the examination at the end of year two without attending any classes. I suppose he thought I was mad, but he agreed. He has had to make those choices for me several times again. He agreed and gave me the concession, special concession granted to Suite, that I would be permitted to do the labs at the end of the year if the state of emergency would be ended before the end of the term. In other words, he said, all right, you study the work, you'll take the exam after you come out, and we will let you do the labs. He gave me that concession. Julian never forgot that. I was mad. And he said, well, it wasn't the first time I was up against those kinds of odds. Lo and behold, the state of emergency was further extended into the following term period. I was disappointed, depressed, I suppose. However, and decided that I would not worry to sit the exam at the end of the period. The state of emergency was extended. If it was extended any further, well, then I couldn't care less. When it was my decision, then I will make it. So when the government extended the state of emergency again, I decided I will close up the books and admit now that I'm up against 4 years to do this engineering program that I didn't want to do, but that I was going to pass. I had lost my second year, that's year 2. It would mean that I would have to re-enter year 2 in 1972-73. That means 4 years to complete a 3-year degree again. The state of emergency was extended to June of 1972 and the end of the academic year. This decision was therefore made for me. I packed up the books in a corner in the prison and I decided, well, whatever happens, happens. My second detention. I therefore had to re-enter year 2. I decided to focus on getting a very good degree. In other words, it's up 4 years, so I have to get a good degree. The 4th year came and ended, and I achieved my goal. I placed first in the class with a first class honors. I got the prize for the best final year project. I brought it there to show you all. I did not expect that an offer would come from any state enterprises or any private company. I was persona non grata in many quarters after 1970 upheaval and the detention known today as the 1970 Black Power Revolution. Part 2. My first job, civil engineering in training. That was my first job as an engineer, civil engineering training. My brother had, at that time, that's Nello, my brother had, at that time, a graduation in and around 1974, resigned his job in Wassa and established his own company, Suite Engineering Services Limited. He invited me to work with him. I had no choice, I had no job. I accepted, and I began to work after completing the final year exam. So now I am an engineering training. My first job as a civil engineering training, I would work with SESL from June to October, 4 months. My first job was in Gulfview. Some of you all might know Gulfview. In those days, they were now exploring Gulfview to what it is now. In those days, it was a swamp. And my brother got a contract, and I was assigned the job to do the work. My first job was at Gulfview, which was a land development company owned by Ben Batu and Jack Ramuta. And my first job involved earthworks, mainly working on sewer development, setting out roads and drainage. I worked under the direct supervision of my brother as an engineer, site engineering training. I had to set out the routes for the excavator to excavate the trenches for the sewer pipes, and the initial work for the road network drainage. Excavation, pipeline, construction of manholes, this was the nature of my job. It involved the reclamation of swampland, and frequent rainfall resulted in the need to pump out trenches. Rain fell frequently, I had to learn the job quickly, maintaining gradients of sewer lines, compaction of trenches, installation of manholes. The work master this type of difficulty over saturated soil under difficult weather conditions. This was my entry into civil engineering. I was a new graduate engineer in training, and this was my baptism. Nello was both my teacher and my supervisor. He was 3.5 years older than I was. After which, for 4 months of the vacation, I would return to the university as a postgraduate student in October of 1970, triumphant and about to undertake a new phase of my engineering education. The period, the benefits, the lessons learned. I decided that in the first 4 months, June to October, I would attempt, this is the focus when I went to Duke as an engineering training. I attempt to learn all that I possibly could. My brother thought I would remain with him and the company, and he set about giving me a baptism in all that could possibly be absorbed. I began looking seriously at a career in site development, infrastructure, land development. I continued to read voraciously on the much as contracting process and utilities site meetings allowed. I decided that I would purchase all the textbooks that I could not have done as a student. It meant going on campus in the bookstore to check all the B and C books. This meant frequent visits to the bookstores. I would attend site meetings, meetings with consultants, meetings with owners, and the state approval agencies. I continued to make copious notes as I did when I was a student. I started to like engineering now. It's strange. While Nello was my boss, he was, as he had always been, my elder brother, my defender in school when I got in fights. He was now my friend. He was only 3.5 years older than I was. This made teaching and learning very easy. It would, however, be a baptism of fire. He was glad, however, for me when I decided to take up a postgraduate scholarship, a PhD, in October of 1974. But I am sure he was a bit reluctant that I would not be with him for the welcome teaching learning process to continue on the land development site. It was a little short period in the professional life of a graduate civil engineer. I'm stressing what is the title I had at the different stage. Graduate site engineer in training. The graduate had to begin to appreciate group work and the implication of site safety, the use of expensive and large pieces of construction equipment, the nature of a construction site, the question of integrated work elements, and the importance of time and cost of materials, machinery, and money itself. For a training engineer, this is but the beginning of a process, very long and integrated one. Part 3. Suite, the academic researcher student, 1974 to 1977. In 1974, I was invited to join the staff by the head of the Department of Civil Engineering, Dr. IDC Imbud, in the Faculty of Engineering of UWI as a research assistant student to pursue graduate degree, PhD, or whatever. After I was awarded a postgraduate scholarship by the University of the West Indies, I had chosen to pursue graduate studies at my alma mater and not to travel abroad. This was the influence of 1970. I decided I would not travel abroad to enter one of the so-called Ivy League universities. I would be joining UWI for the third time. I joined UWI in 1961. I joined UWI in 1970. And now in 1974, I was joining UWI as a graduate student. My supervisor told me that if I register for a master's degree, I could get that done in 2 years. If I wanted to do a PhD, that would take me at least 3 years. So I told him I was very old at that time. I had lost a lot of time. I had lost a career, and I was now starting at the bottom of a new career. And therefore, I didn't have options. My option was I had to do the PhD. And I told him that I will get it done inside of 3 years. So I came into the university almost with a contract between myself and my supervisor that in 3 years' time I had to be out of there. I was told that I could register for the MPhil degree, which I said would take 2 years, etc. I had spent too much time already as a student. I liaised with a single supervisor, Dr. IDC Imbud, and we began designing the scope of the works of my subject. Choice I was to focus on. I had to begin with a quarry, visiting all the quarries, at least first in the Northern Range and then in the rest of the island. I had to begin with quarry and visiting of the quarries and detailed study of the local geology. So the first part of my work was to study local geology. I didn't take an exam in geology, but I felt that I needed to know what is required by the geology students. So that was the first focus I had. I intended to complete with the greatest focus within 3 years, as I said before. I decided to study for first national geology, especially the geology of Trinidad, quarry operations and management, concrete production, concrete properties, testing of properties of all the different local rock and quarry materials. So it meant spending almost the entire day in the lab. But I decided that I will focus ultimately on the work on Portland cement concrete manufacture application in different types of building material. The broad scope would determine my intended specialization. So I started on a broad scope and hoped that out of that, the specific work for the PhD would evolve, and so it did. My specific focus would be that of Portland cement concrete. I got involved in the local quarry grouping, practice, location, and the Portland cement concrete industry. Later, I helped to form the Quarry Association of Trinidad and Tobago. QUAT, it still exists. And I, however, attempted to form the National Concrete Association of Trinidad and Tobago, but I must admit that here I met with less success. I decided that I would begin to publish my findings as I worked in the local construction community, at the Faculty of Engineering, regionally, at local seminars, and I concentrated my study on Milao and Guanapo rock, crushed as aggregate, as well as limestone, calcium carbonate, mainly of the quarries of the Northern Range. So I became a geologist specialist, then a quarry operator, then a concrete plant operator. The undergraduate research project had focused on the properties of concrete made from one aggregate, Milao. I brought that document because that was my first what you may call it, milestone that I felt proud of, because I won the faculty prize. I shared the faculty prize, and that was Appet's prize. I considered that was one of my milestones of joy, that I got the prize that Appet, the engineering body, had taken. I think it was $100 I had to share with a guy in this fellow. So I was glad. Too bad I got the Corsair prize. I got a first class. I felt good. So much for that. But jump forward now. Remember, I tell you I'm now back in UE. My life as a project, a professional engineer, 1976, can be divided into undergraduate, where I got that prize. Then when I went back into it, and I did the PhD work, etc. Academic study extended from 1974 October to 1977. When I was coming here, I decided I would bring some of these documents, partly as testimony, but as interesting milestones. I kept my word about finishing the document in 3 years, so that the document which I brought, and is here for you all to see, has the date when I submitted my completed PhD inside of 3 years. So you can imagine ego feeling good. So I'm not going to go through all of it. Skip some of it. Deciding on the possible scope of work for the PhD, as I said. The actual scope would be expanded as the work progressed. As I obtained feedback, I started to write papers, present them to the faculty, conferences they had here, regional conferences, and then international. I was testing my material that it was PhD standard work by not only enriching the local construction sector, but testing it out. And this was to continue as my own personal thing. How I check myself as to the quality, writing papers and sending them not only to local, regional, international conferences. In fact, I used to go to so many conferences. I went to Australia. That was a very critical. I went to this conference in Australia. I was armed with 4 papers. You'd say I had to be mad. I had 1 paper for a conference in Singapore. And that was the first conference. And the other 3 papers were in Australia. So what I did is I booked 1 ticket. I went to Australia, changed plane, went to Singapore, spent 3 days, present 1 paper, came back, went down to Australia. And there I stayed for the better part of 2 weekends and a week. I remember we stayed there at this conference. Anyhow, I felt that the way I would test my work is expose it, and I continued to do this throughout my career as an academic. Send my work out, whether it's France, or Ireland, England, Australia, United States, wherever. In other words, I'm not relying on whether the people in Trinidad or in the University of the West Indies thought what I was doing was important. The actual scope would expand, that is for the PhD, as I obtained feedback from supervisors and from conferences, seminars, etc. So now I am a researcher in the academic environment. My interest was first the local contract practice. After I'd been in the university, well, I hadn't registered yet, I decided I was a contractor, busy working in Tobago, and they started the MSc in civil engineering and construction. So I registered for it. This was after I'd done the PhD. I was a contractor with a PhD. Most of my workers didn't know I had a PhD because they might think that you only know book things, so you don't tell them that at all. As far as they were concerned, I was Nello's little brother working on the job. But anyway, I ended up in Tobago running. That was a very interesting. I won't tell you about what happened. I was driven off the job. I was driven off the job one night at a PNM meeting. There was a meeting, and they were getting some trouble in Tobago, so they decided to make me the scapegoat. And when I went to the job in the morning, reached the job at 7 o'clock, some of the fellows come and say, boy, last night I had a meeting, and you call up your name. And they said they're closing up the work. Well, in fact, they did close the work down the next day. I was driven off to, I got a letter from ADB telling me to vacate the site immediately. No explanation. I said, all right. But by this time, I had already acquired a certain amount of skill in certain things. For instance, it's not written in the paper, but I started to do arbitration. My first arbitration was 1985. And I remember with great satisfaction, as we broke for a little recreation, drinks of water, etc., a certain senior engineer was in, he was in working with, what's that thing near the crematorium? The engineering company we have again. I'll call it so. And we broke for lunch, and it was my saying, sweet. Would have been about 10 years older than me. Nurse, round nose. Tell me, say, I never was involved in arbitration. I was doing the arbitration, 1985. He was a senior engineer in Trinidad, and he told me he had never been in arbitration. He never had arbitration. He didn't know nothing about arbitration. So when the arbitration was being conducted, I had to conduct the arbitration. He didn't know what was going on, and I had to deal with contractors. He was a consultant. The whole state of the construction sector at that time, out there we didn't have much practice or much training. And I set about running courses out of UE in arbitration. We started arbitration, and we started writing papers on dispute resolution methods, etc. So when I got the letter of dismissal to vacate the site, I laughed because I said I knew that I had done nothing wrong, that I had conducted a thing. They were in trouble with the road digging up. People didn't want, it's a strange thing, remember it. We took it going and say, we don't want no sewers up here. what you all coming over here to do that? Robbie and Robbie Group was against that. And the PNM of the government, they was doing the contract. I was working for this consulting company. And I said to myself, I knew that at the end of the day, that somebody had paid for putting me on for the site. And, I was very pleased when I used to go by a certain PSN to discuss the case with him. And I think he was satisfied with what I knew about dispute resolution and how I'd conducted myself. Anyhow, that project went on like a lot of other things, passing the politics. Now, so now I am a contractor trying to get involved or being involved in the association, the development since I was a student, keeping involved in the association. In fact, I was the president when they got registration in 1985. And I continue to work in the association, and I saw it as a dimension of education for me. And that was my profession. So much so, somebody mentioned something about an award by APET. And I consider that that is the highest award that I could have received, because my profession thought that I was worthy their praise. And I'd labored in the vineyard, but while I was in Tobago, I was doing something else. I used to jump on a plane and come to Tobago. As soon as the classes finished, I reached Tobago. But because I had to attend lectures in the morning and then get on a plane and get in Tobago. I did the master's degree because I wanted to understand the other aspects. The PhD taught me about materials and things like that. The master's degree taught me other aspects. And there it was, I developed more interest in dispute resolution and that aspect of construction. I did a project, because I was very much not only I did a project, an assignment project about the question of I'll show you all about the document to show you all. The question of I drifted almost out of engineering into law, you know. And I did the question of contract law in construction. I did a project on that. I was pleased with it. I'll tell you a little secret, don't say anything. My chief consultant while I was doing the project was that young man. Well, all the problems, whatever I saw in wrestling with the question of contract law, she was my teacher. That was my teacher. And so I did the project. Of course, I got a distinction in the project. I got 80-something% in the project. I feel proud of it, so I brought it to the show. When I put the document, I said, I'm going to print. She said, what you carrying that for? Nobody would be interested in that. I said, well, I will be interested. I'm going to bring it, and I will show them how I spent my time. So after the PhD in materials and geology and all of that, I went and I did that. In fact, I started another project. I had looked at contract law in the construction sector, and in doing that and working in the field, I realized that there's another area of law that I had to deal with. Nobody else had done with it. There were books on tort and all kinds of things, TORT. And I said, listen, there's no book that I've seen dealing with the law of tort in construction. I am going to write a textbook on that. And I started to write, but After time I gave up, I was trying to do too many things, and I decided what I'll do, I wouldn't do another thesis on that. I will write papers, a set of essays on different aspects. So I ended up with one foot going across into, but those were the two areas I was interested in, contract law and tort law. And so there I was. I got a distinction in the you have to forgive me, I'm talking with myself too much. I got a distinction for the project, and what I used to tell my students, you must want to be good. You must want to be very good. You must want to master your field, because if you pick this as an area of study, why be mediocre? Try and be good, very good. So I sought to be very good in construction. When I was a contractor, I sought to be very good. When I went back later on and spent 7 more years in construction, and I used to tell my brother, tell me which are the hardest jobs we have. We are a contractor, we got jobs coming in. I say, listen, which is the job that have the most problem, most difficult? And sometimes you sit down and tell me, well, this one, I said, well, I want to do that. So I used to be chasing jobs. That's how I ended up in Tobago. Good. My friend there, a job down Bourbon Park. Very difficult. I said, going up here because you can't learn engineering if you're hiding. You have to go where the job is presenting to you difficulties every day. And you must match it, which means that the other thing I did is, I said I left university, but I will never leave studying. So even I was 7 years as a contractor, I kept buying books. I kept reading at night. I kept making notes because I felt I wanted, wasn't ashamed. I wanted to be good. I wanted to be very good at what I was doing. I didn't love it. I told that in the beginning. That's why I called the paper an apology. I didn't want to be an engineer. But that, it is as if engineering chose me. As if I had a calling. I didn't know. I was obeying a flow. And I spent today, a few days ago, I celebrated my 85th birthday. I am not religious, but I say I had a mission, possibly my mission. I didn't choose it. I didn't want to do engineering, no kind. But once it came my way, I intended to make the best of it. And that is what I tell my students. Whatever you do, do it to the best you could, which means you have to prepare yourself. And so there I have listed my career. I spent 4 months after getting a degree. I give you a little joke. I went to San Francisco to work on this job, and nobody knew I was a university graduate or going to be. And I remember the day when I came up for results. I was waiting on my brother to relieve me on the job, and he didn't come for about, but to me it was long. I don't know whether he considered an hour. But rain was falling, and I got wet up, all my clothes soaking. So when he finally came to relieve me on the job, and I reached in civil engineering department, all my clothes wet down and full of mud. Now somebody asked me, there's one asking me, where? I said, well, I know the job. There's one was his brother, Professor Emeritus. Yes. He asked me, where you go all the time? I tell him I was on a job, my brother was on a job, and he didn't come to relieve me. I know this. He said, no, all right. And I didn't know what I was being chastised for. I was being chastised because they were about to call out prizes. And I was supposed to get one. I wasn't there. Anyhow, it turned out nice at the end of it. What I did here, I classified all my work. I'm not going to burden you too much more. I have the times, and then I have a lovely chart in the end, at the end of it here, how I spent my time from April 1970 to 1975. And then you all know already when I went from 74, I won't give you an answer story on that. I experienced the longest state of detention in Trinidad. I was detained the first time for 6.5 months. And then the second time I was detained from October, the middle of October, 2 weeks, straight to June, the end of the year. So I spent the whole of that academic year inside. It just drove me more and more to decide how I'll spend my time. I wanted to end by making a few points, if you will forgive me. There were two things I focused on in my paper. You all will get the paper after. One was, I'm not going to read, I'll just tell you. One, the first one was, when I began to teach, and I was teaching first year engineering, I realized that, look, as a young student coming in to do engineering, one of the things that you should be doing is site visits. And I introduced the question of site visits for civil engineering students, where I would divide up the class in about 6 or so students per group, and they'd put one staff member with them, get a maxi, and you take them out. So we drove them to different parts of the island to visit construction sites. They went to quarries, they went to road construction, they went to building construction, to tall buildings, concrete buildings, steel buildings. And what they did was, this is before we used to have cameras that you could take all these sophisticated pictures. In other words, you might find one child in a group with a camera, and that child will take copious photographs and made them available to the rest of the group, a group of 6 or 8 students. And so everybody was taking notes, asking questions of the site engineers, the workers on site, taking photographs, and in 2 weeks they would write up a group report. And I found that this was so important because it was lacking when I was a student. I didn't have that kind of baptism. And it was so important that later on, we introduced site visits, even in the master's program for students who were doing the master's in civil engineering, because that was a very important issue, the question of site visits. I think I should stop. But I want to tell you one thing. I wish to highlight and express my gratitude to my professional organization, APET. And I recommend that young engineers join the professional bodies, the Association of Professional Engineers of Trinidad and Tobago. I became first a student member while I was in the faculty. And in those days, APET would give prizes to students, as they did in my case. I later served as PRO in APET. Then I served as vice president for a number of years. Me and Dr. Chin and Winston Riley. It was an important part of our training to get involved in the other thing that we did a lot of, and has stopped, is getting involved in disaster preparedness. We introduced disaster preparedness both on the course, our courses, and we started to get involved in the disaster preparedness issue. In those days, they were not calling it climate change yet, but that's what it began to be called after climate change crisis up the Caribbean. So we were in the faculty engineering, pioneering all that other area about extra campus and the curriculum kind of thing. So I wanted to introduce that, and I introduced that. Another issue that I did introduce was the question of law in engineering, and all the things that spring from it. So in closing, I wish to thank my academic colleagues for the invaluable assistance they provided me throughout my academic career. I do not blame them for my faults. Thank you all for listening. Every time I read the paper, I see corrections. So I was going to bring a copy. I bring a copy to give the organizers, but they have so many corrections that I told my wife, what I'll do, I will not bring that document with me. I will have her typist make the corrections for me, and I will try and get a document in the next 3-4 days to the organizers of the conference, so they will have a permanent record. Now, before we will close, as I said, my wife tell me, nobody is interested in that. But I wanted to leave here for people to, not leave, but to bring here for people to see those who are interested. Some of the things I spoke of. For instance, let's start again. Some of you may have seen this document in the Contractor Association. I did a paper for them a few weeks ago on ethics. And there's another document that I did that I distributed all in the GT, and I presented it in UWI on the question of a document. The ethical code and the engineering in Trinidad and Tobago. Those are two areas that I spent time on the question of ethics. And then this was, I thought it was not about an office. The first one, this is my BSc project, for which I got $45. I timed with somebody for the price. So this is what it was. And the supervisor, there's one thing good. What's the topic? This other one here is another document that I'm very proud of. The law of contract and the construction sector. And I've seen a name signed to Lynette. Then, what I have in the back here, when it was done, one of the largest documents, I'm sure it's a shame or what, this on my PhD. I remember one gentleman telling some of the typists was typing this. He said, "Don't worry, Dr. Sweet, that's just a big lamb." I felt honored because what the devil is a research project. It's not a theoretical project, it's a research project. And this is what I did inside of the 3 years. I also told you that I used to go to conferences all over the world, testing my own value and my own self-value. My students or my teachers, I always say that, but I didn't say it. My students or my teachers. And what I did, some people might say it's arrogance, but some say it's recording history. What I did is I started to get a printer in faculty. And I started at the end of each year, and so this one is the volume 4. Some people call it arrogance. Volume 4, volume 3, volume 2. In other words, what that is here was I would file it in and I stopped with the $9. All the papers that I write in a year, I bind them and put them together. So some people will say, the series of contemporary bloody and barren. That is important. So I brought those for those who want to take a peek to see what I was doing with my time and the milestones I went through. That was nice one. From some of it. That I remember, because I said, I miss my students. They kept me alive. Because I brought all of my work and presented it to different classes. And that gave me tremendous satisfaction. And they are not, I don't have them around me. I have to write them myself. That's a joke, I'm serious. I am given to writing little commentaries called random thoughts. Random thoughts, that is the punishment for living too long. So the thoughts come to you, you take out the writing pad, and you write till you're tired, and 2 o'clock in the morning you pause. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Now, if you have to take Professor Suite's advice, right, don't just be good, be the sweetest. Thank you very much, Professor Sweetest, for that powerful and personal reflection in so much detail. Your journey reminds us that the heart of project management is not just planning and execution. It happens to be purpose, perseverance, and people. Thank you so much. And we now move into a special moment of recognition. We begin our presentation of awards by honoring the very individual whose legacy we gathered to celebrate here tonight. To present this award, may I kindly invite Professor Bisham Ramlal, our Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, to join us on stage. Thank you very much, Professor. Professor Emeritus Winston Suite, on behalf of the Faculty of Engineering and the Project Management Office, we are proud to present this token of our appreciation for your extraordinary contributions to education, public leadership, and the field of project management. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in applauding our guest of honor as he receives this well-deserved recognition in acknowledgement of your remarkable contributions and unwavering commitment to excellence. Thank you so much, Professor Ramlal. And once again, our heartfelt congratulations to Professor Emeritus Winston Suite, a true pillar of vision, leadership, and legacy. It has been an honor to celebrate with him tonight. Another round of applause, please. As we continue tonight's celebration, we pause to honor the memory of an individual whose quiet leadership and deep commitment to teaching left a lasting mark on this institution. Mr. Stanley Malcolm Joseph Lau. Mr. Lau began his journey at the University of the West Indies in 1958, and over the decades became a pillar within the Faculty of Engineering. He was instrumental in shaping the Master of Science Project Management program, served as head of the Department of Mechanical Engineering, and remained deeply engaged in academic life until his retirement in 2006. More than his titles, he is remembered for his warmth, wisdom, and the way he made students feel seen, encouraged, and capable. His passing in March 2023 left a void, but his legacy lives on in the many lives he influenced. We were unfortunately unable to reach the relatives of Mr. Stanley Lau, and this evening, Dr. Ruel Ellis, Program Coordinator of the Master of Science Project Management Program, will accept the award on the family's behalf, and we will ensure that it is delivered to the family with our deepest respect. Thank you, Dr. Ellis, for allowing us to celebrate Mr. Lau's life and legacy within the community that he helped build in honor of his exemplary service and dedication to excellence. He may no longer be with us in person, but his contribution to this program, this faculty, and this nation remains immeasurable. Please, another acknowledgement in his honor. And having accepted the posthumous award on behalf of Mr. Lau's family, Dr. Ellis will again join us on stage to present our next award. Good exercise, Dr. Ellis. Our next honoree is a distinguished academic and practitioner whose career reflects an enduring commitment to national development, educational reform, and the advancement of project management practice. Ms. Muriel Lazama has served the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in a number of strategic capacities, most notably as the inaugural Director of Funding and Grants at the Ministry of Tertiary Education, where she was instrumental in the development and rollout of the Government Assistance for Tuition Expenses, GATE program. In parallel with her public sector leadership, she has contributed significantly to academia, having lectured for over 15 years in the Master of Science Project Management program at UWI. She is also the founding president of the program's Alumni Association, evidence of her commitment to both knowledge sharing and professional community building. Ms. Lazama holds a Master in Science in Project Management with distinction, along with advanced training from institutions such as Peking University and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. In her current role as Managing Director of Conquest Business Solutions, she continues to lead initiatives at the intersection of education, innovation, and economic transformation. And this award recognizes not only her academic contributions and policy leadership, but the spirit of mentorship and excellence that defines her professional life. Please join me in honoring Ms. Muriel Lazama for her exceptional service and creating a significant impact. Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Yes. And our heartfelt congratulations to Ms. Lazama. Your service continues to shape institutions, inspire practitioners, and expand access to knowledge in meaningful ways. To present our final award of the evening, she's already on stage, Ms. Eunice Caruth, Senior Administrative Assistant, Project Management, to present the next award. And our final honoree this evening is someone whose presence in the project management program was defined by warmth, reliability, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Mrs. Margaret Sylvester Lawrence began her journey with the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine in 1980. Over the years, she rose through the ranks from clerical assistant to secretary in the Faculty of Social Sciences, project management program at the Faculty of Engineering, where she served until her retirement in 2018. And she worked alongside both Professor Winston Suite and Dr. Ruel Ellis, and was known for her deep care in supporting both students and staff, whether welcoming new cohorts, guiding them through their academic journey, or celebrating them at graduation. And even while serving, she pursued her own academic growth, earning a certificate in public administration, a Bachelor of Science in Sociology, and a Master of Science in Public Sector Management. She has remained active in the university community, contributing to the Project Management Alumni Group, and is a proud member of the Caribbean Tertiary Level Personnel Association, TOP, and the UE Credit Union Retirees Association. Today, you're getting the most applause, but okay. Today, she enjoys retirement with her husband, Anthony, often in the garden, nurturing life, just as she did throughout her career. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Margaret Sylvester Lawrence, for her dedication and outstanding service.